to the latest edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside Sam Quinn from CBSSports.com. Sam, basketball has returned. Are you excited?
John, this is one of my favorite times of the year because, for the first time in a long time, there's been one game, second half of the season, I have seen 100% of the games this week. I'm not behind on anything. I don't have to worry about any outdated opinions. Nothing like that. I've seen everything.
Yeah, so there wasn't supposed to be any basketball last night, but there was a makeup game because of the fires in California, so the Lakers ended up hosting the Hornets. And we'll get to that shortly because it did not go well for the Lakers. We, despite the fact that there wasn't any basketball, still have our job to do. So you had to write and I had to talk about basketball. But did you do any non-basketball or at least any non-current NBA related things during the break?
No, I really regret this. I ranked the front offices. That's getting published tomorrow. And I told, when I submitted that, I kind of told my editor, I'm going to load manage for the next week because this one, that took a lot out of me. Maybe we'll talk about it in a future episode. That was not a productive use. Well, it was a very productive use of my All-Star break, but it was not much of a break for me.
You're a sicko. I love that idea. I can't wait to read it. Everybody check it out at CBSSports.com. And yes, we should do that. We'll discuss it next week when you're back on Thursday. I took a break from basketball by watching basketball documentaries. Have you seen the Select Team doc or the Court of Gold doc?
John, I'm so happy you brought this up. I have not watched either. The other night, I think it was Monday night, whenever it released, Monday or Tuesday, I set out, I planned, tonight I'm going to watch this Olympic doc. I was really excited about it, thinking it'll be an hour, hour and a half. And I open up Netflix and I check, and it's 6 episodes, and it's this isn't an hour, this is a night. This is out of hand. I want to be able, the tournament was 2 weeks long. You're not covering a whole 4-year span here.
Oh no, they covered, but it's, you know what? First of all, if you just want a one-off, the Select Team doc is fantastic about them beating the Dream Team. This one, I'm with you. I went in there thinking it was going to be 2 hours, and it is 6 episodes. However, I found it imminently bingeable because you get a lot of behind the scenes talk with the French team. Who else? The Serbians. The Serbians are a whole bunch of characters. Obviously, Team USA. They go into a bunch of other locker rooms behind the scenes, so it's not just Team USA. I recommend it. It's good.
Nice. The Select Team one I definitely want to watch.
Yeah, it's quality. All right. On this show later on, we're going to discuss post All-Star storylines, things we're focused on the rest of the way, including just before we decided to go up on air today, the Bucks being without Bobby Portis because he took the wrong pill. That's their story. He's out for 25 games. That's going to be the Bucks without him for basically the rest of the regular season, almost the entire rest of the regular season. But first, we're going to start with Luka and the Lakers. Sam, they lost again last night at home to the Hornets. Going into the break, they lost at the Jazz, and I said, well, that's their worst loss of the season. And then last night happened, and I'm like, nope, we're going to have to rethink that. They only scored 97 points at home against the Hornets. They had a 13-point lead. They blew it. Revenge of Mark Williams, but this is not exactly, I think, what the Lakers want to be doing in and out of the break right now, especially with Luka.
A lot of people in and around my basketball life have been saying the revenge of Mark Williams thing. That fourth quarter was not friendly to Mark Williams. LeBron was hunting him relentlessly. It was kind of a fascinating end of the game because on one end you have LeBron torturing Mark Williams, and on the other hand you have the Hornets attacking Luka, and it's all of this trade deadline melding into one beautiful crunch time that ends with LeBron missing the 2 threes. I said from the moment they got Luka, this trade was not about this year. So let's calm ourselves and not freak out over these, frankly, in the grand scheme of things, insignificant losses to bad teams. They don't have a center. They need another 3-and-D wing. Luka's clearly not in shape. I'm not panicking over this because I truly don't care what happens to them this year. The real era starts next year.
Yeah, that's fine. And of course, Mark Williams didn't exactly shine, but I did find it quite funny that Mark Williams was shipped back to Charlotte because the Lakers were like, we can't use him. He's broken. And I think he needs a double leg amputation. And then they just roll him out there in LA and end up winning just a brutal, ugly game with Mark Williams on the floor. Let's talk. Okay. So you're right. The Luka era is really about what happens in the next few years. However, he played 33 minutes last night, but he looks rusty as hell in the 3 games since arriving in Los Angeles. He's shooting 35% from the floor, and he has made 4 of 24 3-pointers. That works out to 16%. I did the math on behalf of everybody. Look, what's the old soccer saying that that form is temporary and class is permanent? Luka's a very good player, but he doesn't look good right now.
His legs are clearly not there, right? Like you can see it when he shoots. He's just not generating lift. It's hard for him to literally muster up the strength late in these games to get good shots up. I think down the stretch even it was very, very LeBron centric. I think Luka only took that 1-3 that LeBron kind of forced into his hands, and otherwise it was really the LeBron show. So like the conditioning, I mean, I'm not talking about the conditioning in the sense that like the Mavericks leaks were talking about the conditioning. I'm not talking about it in the grander long-term sense. I'm talking about it in the sense that he was out for 6 weeks and is just now like getting back and is clearly working his way back into shape. That's the biggest thing that I noticed. The other thing is like he has never been in a situation like this where he's played with other high usage scorers, like he played with Kyrie. He's never played with guys like LeBron and to a lesser extent, even Austin Reeves, who are like control the pace of the game type of guys who just have the ball in their hands a lot, pound the rock, but aren't necessarily fully looking to score. So he's very much getting used to not controlling an offense fully. And I think as he gets into better shape and as he gets more experience with this roster, his usage is going to go up and they're going to cede more and more of the offense to him. For now, he's just off of the ball a lot, and I don't think he's fully comfortable with it.
I think that's a little bit of integration issues, right? That he's, LeBron initially said, hey, just don't try to fit in, fit out, be you, whatever. I think he's still trying to like accommodate LeBron and the rest of the guys and like figuring out where he fits in. I'm with you that it's about Luka moving forward for the Lakers, but this season they're 5th. They're a game back of the Rockets for 4th. They're 3.5 games back of second place, but also at the other end, they're just 2.5 games up on the play-in. What do we think about the Lakers this season? Because they did just have 2. I realize that like the NBA season is a long season and you just got a new guy and everybody's figuring out, but those 2 losses are as bad as you'll find in the NBA this season.
I mean, if you forced me to make a pick right now, I actually do think they would be a play-in team. I mean, I think the Clippers are going to pass them. We'll get into this when we get into storylines. Like, I really like the Clippers and I really like the Timberwolves, and those are the 2 teams directly behind them. So I think as they figure out what this team is going to be, they're going to lose a lot of games like this. Just that's not an indictment of Luka and LeBron. That's the reality of figuring out an entirely new team in the middle of February when one of your positions is literally just blank. They don't have a center. It's Jackson Hayes. And like when you're watching Jackson Hayes, you're losing your mind. Like, oh my God, why are you so far out of position? And then Jackson Hayes leaves the game and you're like, man, you know who I really miss right now is Jackson Hayes. It's just a very uncomfortable situation when you only have access to 4 of the 5 positions.
Yeah, somehow something tells me that 31-year-old discard pile Alex Len wasn't the answer there. But also, again, like how bad did things have to be for them to be like, Mark Williams, we're going to do it, and then be like, on second thought. Producer Aaron is wondering if maybe we get a little Lakers-Warriors 7-8 play-in game and how excited Adam Silver would be for that. All right, let's do the Bobby Portis news too, and then we'll do storylines moving forward. So Bobby Portis, right before we came on air, was suspended 25 games for violating the drug policy for taking a banned substance. Bucks only have 29 games left, Sam. Now his agent Mark Bartelstein said that Bobby unintentionally took a pain medication. The story is fantastic. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's excellent. Bobby unintentionally took a pain medication called Tramadol, thinking he was taking a pain medication called Toradol. Now, Tramadol came from an assistant for Bobby who had a prescription, but he told Bobby mistakenly that it was Toradol. So a couple of things about this. Tramadol was recently it's a Schedule 4 drug, so it's like not that addictive, but it was recently added to the banned substance list. But I guess Bobby's story here is that like, hey, I needed a Toradol, and so I asked my buddy, and he gave me a Tramadol. Like, what are you doing did he have loose drugs in his pockets, like a hard candy from your grandma, and he just popped that thing? What are you doing?
Yeah, I think as a general rule, don't take medication that isn't prescribed specifically to you. Like,
Yeah.
am I reading this right? Like, that's a very strange story. And with these things, like, my philosophy is very much like, look, I don't know. Maybe it's true, maybe it's
Yeah.
not. Whatever. The NBA can't make exceptions, right? Like, in the Mark Bartelstein statement, he kind of said, like, I wish the NBA would do something with this being an honest mistake. And it's like, if you call it an honest mistake, then it's an honest mistake anytime that anybody tests positive for this stuff. And we can talk about whether it makes sense for these substances to be banned. I don't know. I'm not an expert on this stuff. Personally, my position is if a doctor thinks it's safe and it's beneficial, go for it. But no, like, if you test positive, the policy is very black and white here. First offense is 25 games. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I'm kind of with producer Aaron who's saying, like, don't take anything that you don't get from team trainers, doctors, strength and conditioning, whatever. Like anything that like has been prescribed and has a paper trail, and they're like, yes, you're okay to take this. Um, yeah, I generally, if I'm an NBA player, probably I'm not going to take, secondhand pills from my friend. That seems like a bad idea. Whether it was an honest mistake or not, this is the situation that Bobby Portis is in, which now means that this is the situation that the Bucks are in. They're 29 and 24. They're in fifth place in the Eastern Conference. They've been without Giannis. They're a game back of the Pacers for fourth. They're just a game up on the Detroit Pistons, who are just like, hey, we're having fun and like playing with house money here. This is not great for a Bucks team that has been kind of scuffling along all season and trying to find its way.
No, I think more than any other team, maybe in either conference, are very, very dependent on the way that the bracket falls. Because if they're in the 4-5 matchup, they get Indiana in the first round. And, like, look, they made the conference finals last year. I don't think any of us take Indiana seriously as a championship contender. And then you get Cleveland in the second, where, again, they're the best team in the East this year, but we haven't seen them do it in the playoffs. That's like the best case scenario for Milwaukee if they still think they have a real chance at making a deep playoff run. If they fall to 6, where Detroit is only one game behind them now, then they get the Knicks in the first round. Not only are the Knicks a better team for them, the Knicks are the single worst matchup for them on the entire board. Whenever Jalen Brunson plays against that drop coverage defense, he just walks into 45 points exclusively in the mid-range every single game. If they play the Knicks, they are losing that series in 5 games. They cannot fall to 6 if they want to have any hope of any sort of meaningful playoff run. So losing Bobby Portis for 25 games is really significant, especially because their old number 3 option on offense, Chris Middleton, now plays for the Wizards. So you're suddenly, without Bobby Portis as you're integrating Kyle Kuzma, like, are they going to have to play Kevin Porter Jr. now? I don't know.
Yeah. This is not a great scenario for the Bucks, who really just don't have a lot of margin of error, a lot of wiggle room here. I mean, that's part of the reason why they ended up, trying to throw a dart and hoping that Kyle Kuzma hits. Aaron brings up a good point here. So this is going to cost, Bobby Marks said, I think it was like 2.8. It's going to cost him about, $2.85 million. So Portis has a player option for next season that's $13.5 million. I would have expected him not to exercise it as well, but now all of a sudden, do you wonder, does he maybe pick it up just because, like, oh man, like this is the safer route now?
I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the rest of their season plays out, because they're kind of in the bird rights trap right now, where if he opts out, like, they can't replace him because they're not a second apron team anymore. They got below, but they're still a very, very expensive team. That losing Bobby Portis is not going to open up the non-tax mid-level for them. They either have Bobby Portis or they don't. So my thought was that he was going to opt out and like extort them for a long-term deal, Royce O'Neal style with the Suns. I still think he's likely to do that. I mean, I guess the one scenario you could maybe see there is like things go so badly for them that they maybe think about a teardown of some sort. But I still think the likeliest scenario for them is like you kind of either have to pay him or lose him. So I do think he'll probably still opt out and get a longer term deal.
Not ideal for him, not ideal for the Bucks. This is definitely not what they wanted to see as they go into the second half, air quotes, of the season. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then on the other side, we're going to do storylines for post All-Star break. That's coming up. This is Beyond the Arc.
We dig it. Do you? The Pro Volleyball Federation on CBS and streaming live on Paramount Plus.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. A reminder, you can get us wherever you get your favorite podcast. Please download, subscribe, leave a review. And if you're listening on Spotify, leave us a comment on this episode. If you look below the play button on the Spotify app in full screen mode, you can tell us what you think about the show or leave a question. All right, Sam, post All-Star break, storylines moving forward. It isn't the second half because most teams have about 30 games left, but, colloquially, it is the second half. You get to go first. What do you got?
So I want to frame this conversation in the right way. I'm not asking about our picks for this. Do you think the MVP race is done? Because we got the second straw poll last week, and it was 70-30 for SGA. Jokic has better stats, I think. Is there anything Jokic can do to win this thing, or is it totally a fait accompli that this is SGA's year?
Glad you brought this up. Also on my list. I also saw the straw poll. It was heavily weighted in favor of SGA, but don't forget that the first straw poll had Joker in the lead. And so I think, is there something that Joker can do? Yeah, they're not that far out of second place, right? I mean, where are they here? They are a half a game behind the Grizzlies for second place in the Western Conference. What happens if they end up pretty solidly in second place and close the gap a little bit on Oklahoma City? What if they are 4 or 5 games back of OKC when this thing is wrapped up and Joker is an absolute monster, and all of a sudden now it's like the Nuggets with the momentum?
Well, this is fascinating too, because the Thunder are going to have the number 1 seed locked up by early March.
Yeah.
So are we going to take that gap seriously if the Thunder basically take the last month of the regular season off? Or on paper, it might be a 4 or 5 game gap, but we know the difference between these teams is very significant. The way I look at it personally, and I think everybody evaluates MVP differently, is Jokic is better than SGA. It's kind of that simple to me. I think, if you switch their teams, if Jokic was on the Thunder and the Nuggets had SGA, the Nuggets are worse and the Thunder are better. To me, it's pretty straightforward that's why I'm leaning Jokic. I don't discount the SGA case entirely, but ultimately to me, I feel like the decision is being made when we still have quote unquote half of a season to go.
I mean, just numbers. So the narrative plays a lot into this, right? Because if we're talking about who's the best player in the world, you get one answer from everybody, right? But MVP isn't really about that. MVP is about what's happening this season and narratives going into it. And SGA has a really great case to make, and he's been fantastic, and he's the best player on the best team in the NBA. And I get all of that, but yet Jokic's numbers are ridiculous. He's on pace to average a triple-double with 50, 40, 80 splits, which would be the first time in NBA history anybody's ever done that. That's really hard to deny. I get the narrative behind SGA. I'm with you. For me, if I had a vote, and I don't, Bill does, we talk through it with him on the show. We'll talk through it with him when it gets closer to voting time. It would be Joker. It's just hard for me to look at everybody in the NBA and not go, that's the guy.
Voter fatigue is a real thing. I've done the research on this. I've really dug in on it. I think we've kind of just reached the point in Jokic's career where we're used to his greatness and we're numb to it. And the way that we were with LeBron around 2014, 2015, there have been a couple of guys that Steph has kind of fallen out of the MVP conversation altogether after he won his 2. Obviously, there's a very strong case that Jokic should have 4 MVPs in a row right now. I just think voters, to an extent, have almost made up their minds where it's Jokic has better stats, but SJ's on the better team and he hasn't won yet. I don't think voters are cautiously or consciously saying SGA hasn't won yet, so we have to give it to him. But it does certainly feel like nobody's arguing that SGA is better than Jokic. So that just has me a little uncomfortable with the way this is playing out.
To that point, to see like the disconnect and the dissonance. So if you're talking about like who the odds makers think will win because they factor in like the narrative and all this other stuff, SGA is a minus 440 and Joker's plus 300. But then if you look at Basketball Reference's MVP tracker, which factors in stats and then looks at, their model is based on how voters have voted previously, then they have Joker at 72% to win it. So they think Joker should be the MVP based on how all the other MVPs have been voted for and his stats this season. But then the odds makers are going, yeah, no, it's probably going to be SGA because how everybody's talking.
And I feel weird having this conversation because I think there's a certain segment of the Jokic camp that's saying like, oh, remember how it played out with Embiid? Everybody should have known in the moment that the MVP for Embiid was wrong, right? Like that was a travesty. It was a terrible narrative throughout that entire race. I thought Giannis was ahead of Embiid, and I thought Giannis was the only other player that had a real case against Jokic that year. It's different with SGA. Like there is a fully legitimate case for SGA to win. My whole argument is that I just feel like it's getting decided a little bit early this year. So what's your next one? I feel like we spent a lot of time on MVP.
Well,
so
one more thing about this while we're on the MVP conversation. Who's fifth? Because this is where the conversation, I think, gets super interesting because, it's going to be SGA and Joker 1 and 2 in whatever order. And then it's going to be Giannis and Tatum. Who do you have fifth?
I think off the top of my head, I'd probably lean Jalen Brunson, but I don't have strong feelings about that. You could talk me into Donovan Mitchell. There's a couple of guys, like if the Lakers had kept winning like as they were before the Luka trade, I might have even been talked into LeBron, but I think right now I'm leaning Jalen Brunson. What about you?
I am also leaning Jalen Brunson. Donovan Mitchell, apologies to everybody in Cleveland. I'd love to have the best team in the Eastern Conference have somebody from that group, but his lift every night isn't as heavy as you'd want it to be for somebody who's going to be in the MVP conversation. I think Cat should get some consideration, but if you're going to take somebody from the Knicks, it would be Brunson for me because he's really the engine. I'm just going to throw out one more name, and I think it's probably too early this season.
I know who you're going to say.
Yeah.
Wemby. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, this just goes to who's the best basketball player out there, right? Like Wemby in the next however many years is going to just be always in this conversation. I guess this year might be like a season too soon, but damn, he's so good. Like, what are we doing? Are we waiting?
I think he still needs to like, there's some rough edges that kind of still need to be, sanded down. Like offensively, I think he's still a little bit too jumper heavy. Defense, like he is the defensive player of the year to be absolutely clear, at least to me.
Yeah.
I still think that like he is also a second year player and there are still little things that he needs to work on. Little tricks like the basketball IQ is going to improve. I don't think he's quite there as a top 5 MVP candidate yet, but I certainly have him as an all NBA pick.
Yeah, me too. I just, back in my mind, just thinking about it a little bit. All right. Other storylines from you that you're looking at.
I want to go to the Knicks for a second. I don't think there's been nearly enough talk about what Mitchell Robinson coming back would mean to them. Because this season has really been for them the story of 5 players. Their starters have been on the floor so much more than any other team in basketball. And that's informed so much of the way that we've talked about that team where we're like,
who could have guessed?
Well, right, given the coach, but we only talk about the Knicks through the prism of those 5 players where it's like, oh, with Towns at center, they can't protect the rim. Therefore, they're a bad defensive team. Like, when Mitchell Robinson comes back, that unlocks so much for them as far as the lineups that they can put on the floor. Like they can do a version of what Minnesota did last year, where Towns is at the 4 and you have a great rim protector behind him. They can have lineups where Towns is on the bench and Robinson is at the 5, and like suddenly you're a defensive monster with Robinson, OG, Bridges, and Hart, and maybe even McBride for some of these lineups. Like, it just unlocks a whole new series of playing styles for them, like lineup options. Like they don't just have to be the all offense team that they've been with those 5 guys on the floor. I think if Mitchell Robinson comes back and is at 100%, that's the thing that could launch them up to like potentially competing with Boston and Cleveland in a series.
This is something that the Knicks have been saying for a while now. And here's my counterpoint to this. Everything that you're saying is correct on paper, but it has largely been on paper with regard to Mitchell Robinson for some time. Who is this hypothetical, theoretical, healthy Mitchell Robinson available to do his dominance on the defensive end that you're speaking of? This is how people talk about Joel Embiid and the Sixers. Just wait until those three are healthy together. Watch out. If they can get into the play-in, anything can happen. What are we talking about here? Mitchell Robinson is tissue paper.
It's totally valid. Like, look, we go through this. There are a few guys who go through this with every year, Embiid obviously being one of them. The way I kind of talk about this is, until I know for a fact that they're going to be out for the postseason, I tend to assume that they'll be healthy. Like, we're going to get to the Clippers in a little bit. I'm still kind of thinking Kawhi's going to be playing in the playoffs.
Yeah,
so
see, this
it's
is what
a
I'm
totally
saying.
valid concern.
I go the other way. No, I don't assume that they're going to be healthy at all. With regard to people like Kawhi and Embiid and Mitchell Robinson, I want to see it. Like, I want to see you get out there and actually play games. And until you do, I'm not going to believe that. We're going to take
totally fair.
Yeah, we're going to take a quick break, and then on the other side, we're going to discuss the Western Conference and Sam's Clippers and who might be the biggest competition to Oklahoma City. That's coming up. This is Beyond the Arc.
We're under the lights in Jeddah.
I think we're in for a show.
A brand new circuit for 2025.
This is proper racing.
The first of 6 doubleheader weekends this season.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. You can find us on YouTube at Beyond the Arc CBS. Please hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and hit that little bell symbol. You'll get notified when we go live. We're usually live Monday through Friday at noon Eastern. Next week, oh man, there's a big one next week. Mavs against the Lakers. We're going to be live on Tuesday night after that game, so be sure to come and join us for that. All right, Western Conference, Sam. We talked about Oklahoma City. They're minus 130 to win the West. They're the best team in basketball. They're the best team in the Western Conference. My question here is if we're going to find like an actual foil for Oklahoma City. The Mavs had been their foil last season. They had a theory of the case. It proved to be correct. They're going to try, to just get past Oklahoma City as best they can with their like new pieces. PJ Washington went crazy, even though Luka and Kyrie weren't really that great in that series. It somehow worked for them. I don't think that that's replicable, certainly not for the Mavs this season, but they're going to have to play somebody if they make it to the Western Conference Finals as we expect. So who do you like among the rest of the West?
Yeah, John, I had a very similar version of this question on my list, except instead of asking who the second best team in the West was, my question was who's the third best team, because I thought we'd be on the same page that Denver is the biggest threat, right?
We are. Yeah.
I just think when you're trying to beat a team as good as Oklahoma City, you have to have something that they don't. You're not going to beat them at their own game. So I look at what is the thing that they don't have, and there aren't many things like that. But the one thing is they don't have a Jokic because nobody else has a Jokic. So when in doubt, I'm just going to pick the best player. I don't know. Is there another team that comes to mind to you that like might be a better matchup for them than Denver?
No, the Nugs because of Jokic. I did want to ask you though, if you are, so we just talked about, believing it when we see it. Are you believing Jamal Murray snapping out of it and being more aggressive and actually shouldering more of the offensive load like he did last week when he took 36 shots and scored 55 points? Obviously, it's not going to be that moving forward, but a more aggressive Jamal Murray, a more score-oriented Jamal Murray has been called for much of the season and much even last season in the playoffs. And like, I want to believe it, but I just want to see more consistency there.
I mean, yeah, look, I can't speak to how he's feeling medically. He looks great right now, and the playoff track record obviously speaks for itself. I think they're not going to be as caught up in seeding this year as they were last year. They obviously had that big push for the number 1 seed that fell short on that last Friday of the regular season. And then we heard, I think it was KCP after the season talking about how they were so worn out from going all out down the stretch. I think this year they're kind of looking at it and saying, if we end up at number 3 or number 4 or number 5, whatever, I don't think they really care as much. So I think their priority is just going to be make it into the playoffs fresh. And if they do, I think the Thunder are going to win the West, and I don't think anybody's going to push them to a 7th game. But if anybody's going to do it, I think the easiest explanation for how is just the best player in the world bullied them for a few games.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty simple explanation, and the one that I like the best. While we're on this, just as an addendum to the whole Oklahoma City conundrum in question, of the group of the teams that are currently like playing-ish, play-in adjacent, maybe even in the play-in? Who do you think that they want to play maybe the least in the first round? I have the right answer here for you. I'm
I
sure you'll
don't
land on it.
think like they've kind of escaped that Dallas, Sacramento, Phoenix vortex of misery. But I think that the play-in-ish team that scares me the most for anybody is Minnesota, because number one, Anthony Edwards can be the best player in that series, but I also think there's just a lot of little wrinkles there that would scare me as a favorite, where like the Randall fit has not been good all year, but do you really want to play against a team that has the potential to play bully ball against you? I don't think so. Like Randall and Gobert and Reed, that's still a lot of size, a lot of interior presence. So that's kind of where I'd lean. You clearly have a team. What's the right pick?
Well, before I get to the right pick, I like the Wolves as an answer here, but you and I have talked about the Wolves a lot this year. And at what point do they not look around and go, oh, you know what? We've been playing pretty well without Julius Randle. Like I don't think it's an accident. What happened last year with the Knicks too? The Knicks lost Julius Randle and then they just started like humming along.
Anthony Edwards is averaging 34 points a game since Randall went down. I have the on-off in front of me. When Edwards is on and Randall's off, they're plus 8.9. Like, this is not an accident. This has been happening all year.
Wolves fans forever and a day have been waiting for Jaden McDaniels to do just like basically anything offensively. Jaden McDaniels all of a sudden, and by the way, he's only 24 years old. So maybe like we were a little premature in being like, this guy can't play on the offensive end. But Jaden McDaniels over the last month, while Julius Randle has been absent, has been really good at both ends of the floor. It's just like, I don't know. I have a question.
They're stuck with that $30 million player option for next year. And they're like just sitting around praying that he declines it. But like, who wants him? Like, who's going to pay him that? They're going to have to find somebody to trade for him, probably as an expiring contract. Like, I don't think he has that much value as a player to anyone at the moment. So
I don't either. I don't either. Who would want Julius Randle? My answer is the Golden State Warriors. I don't know if you saw this. Draymond Green had a very eventful All-Star weekend, and while he was like on TV, absolutely trashing All-Star weekend. And by the way, I didn't disagree with much of what he said. He also predicted that the Warriors would win the championship. Sam, they are plus 3,000 to win the West. They have the 6th best odds. I don't know. They've got 3 really good players. If I'm Oklahoma City, do I really want to see Jimmy and Steph staring down at me? Probably not.
The reverse of that, though, is that they have 2 guys who can put the ball through the hoop, and the Thunder have 6 all-defense caliber players. Like, I just think they can gear so much of the defense towards Steph and Jimmy that, like, I think the teams that are going to pose more of a threat to Oklahoma City are the teams that can beat you in a lot of different ways, at least offensively. Like, look, the Thunder are going to be able to defend basically anybody, but I just think when you're a pretty straightforward offense like Golden State's going to be, where you have your off-ball motion stuff for Draymond and Steph, and then Jimmy's going to try his bully ball stuff, like, you figure that out pretty quickly, I think. I just think they don't have enough offense outside those guys to beat them.
What about the team that we started the show with, the Lakers with Luka and LeBron? Do you want any part of that?
You know what's funny about that is all of last year, and even like through this year, Laker fans were like convinced that the Thunder weren't a threat for them because they kept saying like, oh, Anthony Davis is just going to bully them. They're too small. They're too skinny. And I look at that now and it's like, what are Hartenstein and Holmgren going to do to Jackson Hayes? Like, the Thunder are now way too big for the Lakers. I would be scared of like just LeBron and Luka switch hunting in a series like that against like whoever the weakest link defensively is for the Thunder, even though there isn't really a weak link there.
I was going to say, who are you switch hunting on that team?
Like, I guess SGA, but even that, like, SGA is a good defender. So I guess you could wear him out for offense and try to be like, we dare you to create shots with somebody else. Look, I mean, there's a reason the Thunder have the 2nd best net rating in NBA history. Like, you're probably not going to talk me into any play-in teams really seriously threatening them.
All right, let's do other storylines. I suspect that you are itching to talk about your Clippers.
I'm excited, John.
Okay,
I'm really excited. For a lot of, I mean, look, Bogdanovich has only played 2 games there. He hasn't been great yet, but like,
are you about to give me some Ben Simmons trutherism?
Ben Simmons like has played well for them. What is it? 1 game, 2 games? Whatever it was that I saw, he looked good. Like, they have a little bit more shot creation now. They still have all of those defenders. And Kawhi is like, you see glimpses of Kawhi in there. He's not quite Kawhi yet, but like 2 more months, maybe he gets back up to full strength. Now we're cooking with gas. Like, I just think they're the most complete of the non-OKC Denver teams in the West, where, like, do they have the A1 superstar? If Kawhi's healthy, the answer is yes. Do they have defenders to throw at any kind of opposing star they see? The answer is yes. Do they have secondary shot creation? The answer is yes. Like, there isn't a really visible weakness on the Clippers roster if they are healthy, which is obviously an enormous if.
You like them more than the Grizz?
I wanted to talk about the Grizzlies too, because that's the other team that I'm considering here. The Grizzlies fascinate me to no end because they're like the quintessential regular season stuff team, right? Like the things they do historically don't work at all in the playoffs. Like, for those who aren't binging the Grizzlies on League Pass, there's no team in the NBA that plays like them. They never run pick and roll. They drive like crazy. They drive like 10 plus times more per game than any other team, but none of it is with ball screens. They're the fastest team in the NBA by far. The playoffs slow you down. They run like an 11, 12-man rotation. In the playoffs, you're supposed to get down to 6 or 7. Like, they're the quintessential we win doing regular season stuff, and I can't wait to see if it works in the playoffs yet. I'm not taking a defined stance. I don't know if it will work or not, but I'm very eager to find out.
I keep waiting for Taylor to shorten his rotations. Maybe it'll happen during silly season where he's like, okay, we got to get this thing ready for the postseason. But yeah, no, I'm with you. And like they score a ton of points and they don't do a lot of it with 3-point shooting either. So it's like, it is a very strange system that they've worked out, but they do have a lot of useful players. And like, for me, it's all about like, what kind of John Morant are you going to get? Is he going to be healthy? Is he going to be engaged? He's had a really inconsistent season. Meanwhile, Jaren Jackson Jr. has been amazing. Like he's the best player on that team.
Yeah.
What else do you have on your radar?
Let me go through this list. We kind of have to talk about Philly, don't we? Like, when do they embrace the tank? When does Embiid get the surgery? Like, are they going to pretend for another week or two? How much squinting do we still have to do?
Oh, your eyes are all the way closed. You're squinting so hard. So for people who don't know, we're 2 weeks removed now from Daryl Morey giving an interview and saying that, if you squint at it hard enough, this is a championship roster. LOL. They've lost 5 in a row. They're coming out of the break having lost 5 in a row. They lost to the Nets in the last game before the break. PG was an absolute no-show. He scored 2 points. They lost to the Raptors. They lost to the Bucks without Giannis. They lost to the Pistons without Cade. They lost to the Heat without Jimmy. And by the way, in those 4 games, Raptors, Bucks, Pistons, and Heat, all 3 of PG, Maxey, and Embiid were available. And I was told that just wait until those guys are available, and here come the Sixers, and all they need to do is get the 10 seed. I am 100% with you. Embiid has played 17 games. He said that he didn't have enough time to recover from the last knee surgery, and he might need another. PG has forgotten how to shoot. Shut Embiid down. They owe their first-round pick to Oklahoma City, top 6 protected. If they have, at present, they're tied for 5th right now, or no, they're tied with the Nets for the 6th worst record. They have a 46% chance at present to keep their pick. If they fall to 5th, that goes up to 64%, better than a coin flip. Why wouldn't you want to maximize your odds for a team that is going nowhere fast this season?
And I love that you have those percentages memorized.
Memorized.
That's the sign of like a true fan at heart, and I really love it.
A true tanker at heart.
You got everything right. You nailed it.
I am a original godfather of the process era. I saw this up close and personal. I know what we need to do here.
So I did these front office rankings. We'll talk about them next week. I'm just curious, where do you think I had the Sixers? And like, where do you think would be appropriate?
Oh, you know what? That's an interesting question because I think Daryl Morey's really smart. I really do. I think he has been consistently one of the best general managers in basketball since he was hired by the Rockets. I believe it was 2006, somewhere around there. Now he hasn't won anything, but it's hard to win a championship. There's 30 teams trying to do it. But this year, the circumstances are that there were a ton of injuries and they couldn't get this thing off the ground and the plane like crashed on the runway. But his idea, I was on board with his idea and he rebuilt the thing on the fly and all the moves he made, I would have made too. So it's really difficult for me to grade because on the one hand, I understand why he did what he did and I endorsed it. And on the other hand, none of it has worked.
So it's interesting that you say he hasn't won anything because I think that's a common refrain. I just want to point out he hasn't lost anything either. This is his 18th season as a GM. This is going to be his first year in all of that stretch, finishing below 500. Like Daryl Morey has consistently built winners without tanking.
Yeah.
Not too many general managers can say that. The only thing he doesn't have is the championship trophy. And I'm with you. I think the idea here was sound. It's just worked out so horribly. I ranked Philly at number 10, kind of under that logic, where I couldn't have them in the top tiers because the Embiid contract and the George contract have gone so badly. But I fully trust Daryl Morey's vision of building a team.
Which of those contracts is worse right now? Because they owe PG 3 more years at north of $160 million. I was looking at this the other day and just groaning out loud. But then Embiid is Embiid, and like there's a non-zero chance he just like goes into the offseason and never plays again.
I would rather have the Embiid contract just because I still believe somewhere deep down MVP runner-up Embiid still exists. I'm not going to call him MVP Embiid because like he shouldn't have won it. But like a top 5 player in the NBA is still in there somewhere. And look, I hate to be stuck with that contract for whatever it is, 5 years. With Paul George, I just look at it and I'm like, that's a $50 million role player. I don't have anything else to say about it. Like, that's what it is. Like, I'm sorry. He's scoring, 14, 15 points a game. He's not making any shots this year. The creation has really gone down. Like, he's a $50 million role player at this point, and I don't expect that to get better. I'd at least like to take the coin flip on the guy who could still be an all-NBA player. I don't think that's possible for George anymore.
It's really, really staggering. And it just keeps happening over and over again that people get to Philadelphia and you expect these great things for them. And over again, whether it's Ben Simmons or Markelle Fultz or Paul George, I'm sure I'm forgetting like countless others who just James Harden, who all of a sudden like not only underperform, but just like forget how to shoot. It's Harden less so, but the other 3 guys, especially like PG's coming off a year that he had a career year shooting the ball. He looked awesome last year, and the Clippers rightly let him walk and turned Norm Powell into new PG, made a business decision that was your Clippers. Very, very smart. And I was like trumpeting, hey, this works out both ways. Bring him in. You sign him into cap. This is great. You don't have to give up anything for him. And man, that is a bad deal. Can we talk about my actual basketball team for a second?
Please.
The Houston Rockets, my favorite team in the NBA. Here's a question I'm looking forward to. Who goes to the bench when Jabari comes back? Because it's not going to be Amin.
No, I don't think Amin Thompson is ever coming off the bench for the Rockets again. It's a tough call, man. Man,
it's either Dylan or Jabari, right?
I guess Jabari is probably going to come off the bench just from the logic of I think Dylan Brooks is so important to their culture, and as we saw in Memphis, it can go so far south so quickly with Dylan Brooks that you don't want to risk rocking the boat there where like you can kind of point to seniority and be like, oh, Dylan's the vet. You know, Jabari, you're going to be more comfortable coming off the bench. Of course, Jabari is kind of in a contract year. This is year 3 for him, so he's extension eligible after the season. I don't know how thrilled he'd be coming off of the bench, but I don't see a better alternative there.
Yeah, I think it's probably Jabari too, just because you could see, staggering him and Şengün. And then that's a type of player that the Rockets have a whole bunch of super long rangy wings coming off the bench, but they don't really have like a front court answer to, Steven Adams, apologies, but I'd rather have Jabari get more meaningful minutes. So just something, God, Amin Thompson has he shot out of this thing like a rocket ship.
I was thinking about this too. Like, I can't believe the degree to which we don't talk about the fact that he has a twin brother. There's another one of him in the NBA.
Yeah.
And the Pistons are a playoff team. Like, I've been thinking about how the last few months, Amen Thompson has been the breakout player in the league. Is Asar Thompson going to have that same glow up over the next few weeks, months? It's starting to happen.
He's starting to show hints of it. And silly season's here. They're a playoff team. Like, I could see him really getting some significant, a significant step forward for sure. They're both really good players. Last one from me, and then I'll see if you have any other ones here. Who ends up winning the worst rookie of the year race? Certainly in recent memory, maybe ever.
I guess Stephon Castle. And like Stephon Castle's good. I don't want to take anything away from him. Like
He is good.
there was a minute there where I thought it might be a Khalil Ware. I think he's like so very promising, but not to the same degree, I guess. Jared McCain was somebody like we thought it was going to be him, and then he got hurt. I'm defaulting to Castle, but I don't feel great about it. Like maybe Jalen Wells just because he's so important to such a good team.
But I think like his minutes aren't high enough, right? Just because, as we mentioned, Taylor plays everybody. But I like Jalen Wells too, and that's another perfect Grizz guy that they hit on that nobody anticipated to be this good. But I kind of think like one, his minutes aren't high enough, and two, whatever votes that like Edie, you're kind of splitting some Edie votes there. I think it's Stephon Castle. Stephon Castle is actually good, and I expect him to have like a really fantastic career. And if you're the Spurs, how excited are you about that backcourt going forward with him and Fox?
My only question there is with the shooting, especially with Sohan still there. Like Fox is quietly not a great shooter, and Castle can't shoot at all. So I think they'll figure that out. And I think Fox is not such a bad shooter that like, he's not like a 28% shooter. He's like a 32, 33%.
Yeah, 32% is not good though, Sam.
No, like it's a problem. But remember, they also have Wemby at center, which opens some things up for them. Like I was of the opinion that like if my options were trade $1 million smaller assets for Fox or trade Castle for Fox, I kind of thought it made more sense to trade Castle just because you deal with the fit issues right away. Now, I do think they deserve some time to figure it out because the talent there and the athleticism is so incredible. So, like, play this out for a year or two. See how it goes.
Absolutely. His talent and athleticism, look, everybody was saying last year, and it was true, and it remains true, that Amin Thompson can't shoot. And all of a sudden you're like, that's okay. We can excuse that because he does a zillion other things. I'll take the talent and the athleticism, and we'll just figure out the shooting as we go here. Quick one for you that Aaron threw out that's interesting. You interested in any long odds on Donovan Clingan with Dominatin being out?
I mean, well, the problem is he has such a fouling issue at that side. He's still so inexperienced. I don't know if he's conditioned to play enough minutes. Like Rookie of the Year is such a counting stats award historically. And
but he's going to get
not somebody who's going to rack up the numbers.
Well, you know what? I think he's going to play enough to, in limited samples, like when he plays like north of 24 minutes, he's a double-double machine. And like, it is a pretty thin race.
Yeah. The other thing is who's going to be watching Portland in March? That's the other problem is like, there's like the opposite of a spotlight is going to be on them. So like, there are going to be voters who kind of go like, oh, was he good down the stretch? Like, maybe just let me check Basketball Reference. I don't think, like, with Castle, a lot of people are going to be watching him. With Jalen Wells, a lot of people are going to be watching him. The burden of proof is kind of on Clingan as a long shot right now, and the fact that nobody's watching Portland is not going to help him.
Fair enough. And I think like Portland finally figuring out that, oh yeah, we should be playing, like being forced to play the young guys instead of DeAndre Ayton because DeAndre Ayton got hurt. Congrats on that. All right. Any other storylines for you?
What's up with the Raptors? I'm just like, I don't know what they're the only team in the NBA where I don't know what their plan is. I don't know what their goal is. Most of them are like healthy. We're going to get to see like Brandon Ingram with this core during the last few months of the season, which is really strange because like they really should be tanking. They don't have a franchise player. Like them trading for Brandon Ingram might be the difference between Philly keeping and losing their pick, right? Because they're presumably going to be trying to win down the stretch.
Well, I think that they kind of, they are, I think, accidentally going to be trying to win down the stretch. I think this whole thing, Masai, like just accelerated it slightly too quickly because Quickly was out for much of the year, right? RJ was been in and out of the lineup. Brandon Ingram, when he was with the Pelicans, he hasn't played many games. And now, like when he comes back, yes, you're going to see that core. I think this whole thing is set up for them to actually try next year. But yes, you're right. They might end up, just because guys are healthy and they might want to play them, might end up winning too many games or more games than they wanted to win this season at the back end, which is unfortunate.
It's such a weird rebuild because they traded OG for players instead of picks, which kind of precluded like a proper tank. They accidentally wound up tanking because of all the injuries this year. But like once they made that trade, it was kind of a pronouncement of like, we are not going to intentionally pick in the top 5. It's going to happen potentially accidentally. But once you've made that declaration, you kind of have to like really believe that you either have the superstar in place or you have some other way of getting him. And I don't think Scotty Barnes is that guy. I don't think Brandon Ingram is that guy. Like, I don't think they have a top 25 player in the NBA. And that is such a weird team to build so intentionally towards.
All right. Hey, so we got some breaking news here from Shams. Shams is reporting that Victor Wembanyama has a form of a blood clot in the right shoulder, and he's expected to miss the rest of the regular season.
Oh, no. That is bad.
A deep vein thrombosis in his right shoulder. The Spurs believe this is an isolated condition. The Spurs were playing with house money. They were excited, obviously, about what Wemby could do moving forward. I don't think you want to see any kind of shutdown situation for Victor Wembanyama ever. So this is unwanted news for sure.
I mean, look, with blood clots, I mean, the guy that comes to mind is Chris Bosh, where that
they're dangerous.
His career.
Yeah.
I am not a doctor. I want to stress that emphatically. And the reverse of that is like it happened for Brandon Ingram once, and then it's never come up again. What you really, really hope is that that's going to be the case here. But that is a very scary medical condition. And all I can say is, like, I really hope it's just an isolated issue and he can recover whatever the treatment here is going to be. Man, that is a bummer. I don't know what else to say. Producer
Aaron has a comp here. Christian Coloco had it, and he missed a year because of it. And not to say that this is the same exact thing, and that Wemby is obviously a different human being, and who knows, and maybe the Spurs are being, overly cautious because it's Victor and because they don't have designs on actually winning anything this season. Maybe they decided, okay, let's just shut them down right now. I don't know what's the remedy for something. Is it just time?
Again, this is,
I'm asking Sam, I need your expert medical opinion on this.
Do you think I could maybe make it through 4 years of medical school by next week's episode? Correspondence medical school. Is that a thing?
Oh man. But when you bring up the Bosh situation, like that really screwed him up for a very long time. And it truncated his career. And I really hope that's not the situation here.
And he's not the only one too. There have been a few other players. There's someone on the Bucks. I can't remember who it was. Somebody in the last 5-10 years. Like, this is not just a basketball injury. This is like a serious medical condition that like can really affect your entire life. So
yes,
whatever they need to do to figure out like what's causing this, what can you do to treat it? Like, this isn't even a basketball matter anymore. Like, just get right, Wemby.
With a blood clot situation, I had a friend of mine who he found out it was like, life threatening. He caught it just in time. And like, there are certain situations where like, if you have a blood clot issue and you don't know about it and you like hop on a plane, all of a sudden, like your life is at risk. I mean, yeah, it's a dangerous situation. So man, that sucks that no more Wemby for the rest of the year. I really hope it's not like, man. All right. Well, we'll find out. All right. I guess that's going to do it for us today. I'm assuming now off you go to write about Wemby in addition to your front office piece.
I guess. Yeah. I mean, I'm still processing it. I don't even know what to say.
Well, we'll continue processing it. We're going to have more on this and other matters NBA related. The NBA is back in full swing tonight with a full slate of games. And then, of course, the Wemby issue. We're going to talk about it all tomorrow on our Friday edition of Beyond the Arc. You can catch us live on YouTube at noon Eastern. You can find us on YouTube, obviously, at Beyond the Arc CBS. All right, for now, for Sam Quinn, be sure to read all of his stuff at cbssports.com. I'm John Gonzalez. We thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.